Hello friends, this is Karl, the host of Rudolph of Germany, and I was thinking, since I'm here sitting in my bed having a little cold, maybe I make a small video, about the first few years of my life. Maybe some of you may understand a little bit better the circumstances which led me to become the host of Rudolph of Germany, who is occupying the bodies of my forebears for a very long time. And I was being recruited into this duty already very early in life. Let's start with the beginning. I will call this whole thing here right now Confessions 1. Maybe later I will make another video with more confessions, but I have to be very careful, because if I'm truly honest to you, then some of these confessions are rather hard to digest for some of you. But let's start with the beginning. I was born in the year 1954, so it doesn't make me really that super old as I look. It's just as I lived probably a little faster than most of you. And that makes me look a little bit older. So I'm not really that old. Well, by now, yes. But people thought I was already in the Second World War about 10 years ago when I was starting these videos. And if you have any idea about history, then it's kind of laughable, because I was born 9 years after the end of World War II. To a woman of good standing. I'm coming from a well-off family, but, well, as I was born 1954, my mother was not much older than me, I would say. She got me when she was just barely 17 years old. She was almost a child herself and not really prepared to be a mother, so I grew up in my grandparents' household. And my mother was a very lively woman and spent more time partying than being a mother to me. I knew this already at an age when the first tooth was just beginning to appear. And when my mother tried to take me in her arm, which was very rare, a rare occasion, then I knew already that I was not very fond of her. So the very first thing I did to my mother was I bit her with my toothless mouth into her finger, and she screamed. And I didn't like to let go. I had pleasure doing so. Well, that was the beginning of my rather strange career. And obviously, since my father also was a man of pleasure and traveled the world, not caring about his child and later children, so I was more or less standing on my own very early in life. I remember many different occasions where people tried to teach me lessons. How a young man or a boy at my age of back then, just barely 10, had to behave. When I started smoking and drinking alcohol at the age of about 10 or 11, my father even, who himself was a man of loose pleasures, I would say, would tell me, "Stop, you are not supposed to smoke and drink at this early age." And he grabbed me and tried to teach me a lesson. I remembered that he never cared much about me, and I saw him only a few times in life. So what I did is I was, excuse me my English, I was kicking him as strong as I could into the balls. That was one of the few occasions I had some kind of conversation with my father. And this was about the time since Rudolf of Germany, which I really see as my mentor. Rudolf of Germany came into my life because he tried to enter my father, which was not very successful, and he was, of course, over generations with the males of our family. But my father was not really anybody he could make any kind of progress with, which would be like teaching the human population on planet Earth certain things about their heritage and the tall white aliens. My father was not really into this, so when I was very young, like about 12, Rudolf of Germany slowly groomed me and entered me, so my relationship to him became clearer over the years, and I became his mouthpiece, so to speak. Yes, and so life went on, and I was a good Catholic boy, like my family for generations. And one day I went to church when the priest was overlooking some kind of renovations in the church. They had a very large crucifix supposed to be installed behind the altar. I remember very well. And I know by then I was already in intense contact with Rudolf of Germany, who is not fond, as you all know, of any kind of religion other than the tall white alien teachings themselves. So I went to church as a good Catholic boy. I was then a bit older. I was then about 16 or 17. And the priest overlooked the work of the people who were supposed to put up this huge crucifix behind the altar. And after the people left, the workers left, he wanted to have a personal conversation with me, and he called me to him and spoke to me and told me what a good boy I was, and also what a pretty boy I was, and I truly was. And I think I'm still kind of pretty. That's just a joke. I remember this particular situation where he called me to him and he wanted me to sit on his lap. And then he started touching certain body parts, which basically you can imagine where they are located. And I was totally irritated. And then I heard the voice of Rudolf, who told me, never ever do something which you are not willing to do, and teach this old guy a good lesson. Well, the good lesson was this, that I was a pretty strong boy at this time. I gave him a good slap and I pulled him down onto the floor. And I grabbed one of the hammers which were laying around. I remember this. And I thought the right thing to do is for a good Christian to spend some time on a cross. Later on, I did more work in this direction. But at this time, I took his hand and I put my knee on it, on one side of the huge wooden crucifix, and I took a nail and a hammer which was laying around there from the workers, and I nailed one hand of his into the crucifix at the right spot. Then I tried to do the same thing with the other hand, but he fought back too hard. I was exhausted. I couldn't finish this duty, so to speak. And then I just left him there with one hand on this enormously, I don't know, it was at least 6, 7, 8 feet large, long crucifix. So he couldn't get up and he was nailed down. I left, and later on I went to church, and he was already freed again. He had a bandage on his hand. It was a few days later, and I came to Mass and tried to be a good boy. And he looked at me, got pale in his face, in front of everybody. And I wondered what's going to happen next. Well, actually, he did not say a word, and never ever said a word to me or to anybody else. Today, as a grown-up man, I know why. If he would have spoken about this little incident, which was really not much compared to many things later which experienced in life, if he would have spoken to people about it, then, of course, the whole story which led to this incident would have come out, that he is a child molester. He could not go for it, of course. So I was safe. And there are many more stories in my youth which, with the help of Rudolf, I became a grown-up man, never taking anything from anybody, no advice from anybody else but Rudolf himself. And that's also why I became an independent creature, as I am. One thing I want to say, I'm sorry, I told you I have a cold, right? I was too long out in the forest at night, and the nights by now, it's September, they get quite fresh. One thing I want to say before I leave you for today, maybe I make more confession videos if you love them and if they are inspiring to you and your own behavior. One thing I want to say, my mother, I remember that when I was 2 or 3 years old, she called me the incarnated. That's in Germany, der Leibhaftige. And that is another word for the devil. I never forgave her for it, because I'm not a devil, as you all know. Particularly now when I'm getting a bit older, I'm quite a softie, as they say today. And you may ask even people who know me, particularly Amy, that I'm a very caring man. And I don't want to give the wrong impression here. But surely I was always independent-minded. I never let anybody tell me what to do. Why would, just a thought in the end, for you, why would one human have the right over another one or telling another one what to do? This I never understood, and that was my first law of life. I am as good as anybody else. With these thoughts, I leave you for today. Karl, the host of Rudolph of Germany.